press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update.
Namaste children. So in our previous class we discussed about the cells and the difference between plant cell and animal cells, difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and all the organelles which are present inside the cells, their function we discussed. So in detail about that we are going to study in our regular classes. In this class we'll discuss the characters which are very unique to the living organisms. Understood? The defining properties or defining characters seen only in living organisms we'll discuss in this class. So the living world. So when we look around our environment, we see both living and non-living things. So which makes what we call it as living. Living means we should have lifespan. Then what is lifespan? Lifespan andre it's a period between birth and death. It's a period between birth and death. We call it as lifespan. The things which have lifespan are considered as living organisms or living things. Understood? So the one which is having birth and death, we consider them as a living things. So this birth and death will not see in non-living things. Non-living things ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹುಟ್ಟು ಮತ್ತೆ ಸಾವು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. It is seen only in living organisms or only in living things. So now we'll discuss the characters which are seen only in living organisms. So the characters of living organisms. So here we are talking about characters and defining characters. ನೋಡಿ ಇವಾಗ ಡಿಫರೆನ್ಸ್ ಏನು ಅಂತ. ಕ್ಯಾರೆಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ವಿ ಸಿ ಕ್ಯಾರೆಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಲಿವಿಂಗ್ ಆರ್ಗಾನಿಸಮ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡುವಂತ ಕ್ಯಾರೆಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ವಿ ಸಿ ಗ್ರೋತ್, reproduction, response to stimuli, the next we see metabolism, etc. All these we see characters in living things. So defining, what's the difference between defining character and characters? So defining character antandre it should see the character should be present in all living organisms without any exception. It should seen in all living organisms without any exception. Then that character we considered as defining character. Understood? If that character is present in all living organisms with some exception, avaga ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ characters ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತಗೊಂತೀವಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. If that is seen, that character, particular character is seen in all living organisms without any exception, that character we are calling it as defining characters. Understood? So let us discuss now among the characters which will come under defining characters. So first we'll go with the growth. So what is growth? Growth means increase in size or increase in mass. Increase in size and increase in mass we considered as growth. Understood? So increase in size and increase in mass means, here increase in size and increase in mass anta andaga when the number of cell increases, the mass also increases. So increase in size and increase in individual organisms, increase in size and increase in individual organisms are considered as twin characters. They are considered as twin characters of growth. They are considered as twin characters of growth. Understood? So, suppose if this is a amoeba, how it increases its number by a process called binary fission. So single cell will become 2 cells. Again the 2 cells become 4 cells. Like this, the number of cell ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. When the number of cell, when increase in individual organism, the increase in number of individual organisms, increase in number of individual organisms automatically increases their mass. Automatically increases their mass. So that's why increase in size or increase in mass or increase in number of individual organisms together call it as twin characters of growth. So now coming to the growth, as we know that twin characters are increase in mass and increase in number of individual organisms are twin characters of growth. So now we'll see the growth in plants and in animals. So in plants, growth is continuous. In plants we see till the end, we see the growth. Whereas in animals, it is up to a limited period. Growth we see only a limited, up to limited period. Understood? Growth we see in both plants and animals. Eradalallu growth noಡ್ತೀವಿ. But in plants, the growth is continuous. Whereas in animals, it is seen only to a certain period of time. So it shows only in limited period. Understood? Then growth is also seen in non-living things. How we see growth in non-living things? ನಾವೀಗ ತಾನೇ ಓದಿದ್ವಿ increase in mass ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. So ಇವಾಗ in mountains, every year we see the deposition of materials on its surface. External deposition ಆಗ್ತಾ ಆಗ್ತಾ growth ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. Deposition ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆದಂಗೆನೆ the size of the rock also increases. That also we are considering as a growth. Then growth is seen in non-living also. Understood? But in living growth is intrinsic. Whereas in non-living we see extrinsic growth. Understood? In living organisms we see internal growth. Internal andre intrinsic. By the cell division, the number of cell increases, that leads to growth. So hagagi internal growth we see in living organisms. Whereas in non-living organism, internal growth is absent. There is no cell division. There is no increase in number of cells. Only we see the deposition of materials on their surface, external surface. So that increases their size and mass. So that type of growth is called extrinsic growth, seen in non-living things. As the growth is seen in both, whether it is intrinsic or extrinsic, but growth anta bandaga it is seen in both living and non-living. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ growth is not considered as defining character. Understood? ನಾನೇನು ಹೇಳಿದೆ, ಡಿಫೈನಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾರೆಕ್ಟರ್ ಅಂದರೆ that should be seen only in living organisms without any exception ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ. ಬಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತಿದೆ, growth is seen in ನಾನ್ ಲಿವಿಂಗ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ growth is not considered as defining character of living beings. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ನಾವು growth is synonymous with reproduction in unicellular organisms ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. So growth is synonymous with reproduction in unicellular organisms. ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, as I told, amoeba is a single cell. When it divides, it gives rise to two cells by a process of binary fission. Like this, two cells will give rise to four cells. Like this, the number goes on, increases. Nothing but binary fission is a reproductive process, but the increase in number of cell results in growth. Hagagi, growth is synonymous with reproduction in unicellular organisms. Understood? So due to this reason, growth is not considered as defining character. So which are two twin characters we see in growth? Increase in mass and increase in number of individual organisms are considered as twin characters of growth. Growth is continuous in plant cells, and in animal cells growth is seen only up to a limited period. And in living organisms, growth occurs due to cell division that occurs inside the living body. Hagagi intrinsic growth is seen in living, whereas in non-living things we see extrinsic growth. And due to this, as we see growth in living and non-living, its growth is not considered as a defining character. Now coming to the other one character, that is reproduction. We know that what is reproduction? It is a biological process or physiological process in which an organism produces young one of its own kind to continue the race is called as reproduction. It's a biological or physiological process in which individual produces young one of its own kind to continue the race, or organisms produces young ones or offsprings of their own kind to continue the race is called as reproduction. We know that there are two types of reproduction: sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Understood? Even though reproduction is not seen in non-living organisms, reproduction is not present in non-living things. It is not considered as defining character. Yake? So yake anta ivag nodona. See, we know that in sexual reproduction we see the fusion of gametes, fusion of male gamete and female gamete to form a zygote. So single zygote give rise to multicellular organisms. All multicellular organisms are produced by single cell called zygote. Whereas in asexual method of reproduction, budding we see in yeast and fragmentation is nothing but, see, if budding means, say, yeast, external growth from the surface of an organism is called external budding. It's called external budding. After that, this bud detaches from the main organism and develop into new individual. That process is called budding. Fragmentation means like spirogyra. When we cut the organ, they themselves break and every fragment develops into new individual. That process is called fragmentation. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವೇನು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ? Fragmentation is seen in fungi, filamentous algae. There we see fragmentation. In fungi, filamentous algae, we see fragmentation. So, other method of asexual reproduction is regeneration. Regeneration is seen in planaria. It is a flat form where the organism, see here, when we cut the organism into 2 or more pieces, every cut piece develop into new organism. That is nothing but regeneration. This cut part will regenerate its other lost part, and this cut part will regenerate its lost part. Like this, each fragment will give rise to new individual. That's nothing but regeneration. Nothing but regeneration. And we know that amoeba, bacteria, in amoeba, bacteria and unicellular algae, see, filamentous algae produces fragmentation. Filamentous algae will reproduce by a process called fragmentation, whereas unicellular algae reproduce by a process called binary fission. Here, the reproduction is synonymous with growth. The organisms which reproduce by a process called binary fission, there we can tell the reproduction is synonymous with growth, or growth is synonymous with reproduction. So, like this, the living organisms reproduce to produce young ones of their own kind. So, the organisms which reproduce by binary fissions are always immortal. We use a term called immortal. Immortal andre adukku saave illa. Yake saave illa? There is no death in this organism. Andre the single cell again become 2 daughter cells. Parent cell itself is becoming daughter cell. Again the parent cell is becoming daughter cell. Like this, we see the parent cell itself is becoming daughter cell. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಈ ತರ organism which reproduce by binary fission, those organisms we call them as a immortal. There is no death to these organisms. So like this, the reproduction is seen in living organisms or living things. But see here, all living organisms, whether all living organisms will reproduce or give birth to young ones? No, exception ಇದೆ. ಯಾವುದದು exception ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, see here, sterile worker honeybees. Sterile worker honeybees. Infertile human couples. And mule. These are all living organisms, but they cannot give birth to young ones. Sterile worker honeybees are female honeybees. These honeybees will not involve in sexual act. They just go and collect the honey, nectar from different flowers. ಈ honeybees sexual act, drones ಜೊತೆ sexual act involve ಆಗಲ್ಲ, but they help to just collect the nectar from different flowers. So that's why they are sterile. They are not involved in reproduction. Infertile human couples, due to some reasons in both male or female, they are unable to reproduce or give birth to young ones. Even though they are living, they cannot give birth to young ones. And mule. Mule is an offspring we got by crossing male donkey with a female horse. By crossing this, we got a mule. But mule cannot give birth to offspring. Even though all these three are living organisms, but they are not able to give birth to young ones. Hagagi, reproduction is not a defining character of living organisms. Defining antandre without any exception irbekit. But ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತಿದೆ? Reproduction is seen in all living organisms except ಅಂತ ತಗೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ವಿ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ except in these organisms. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ reproduction is a character of living organisms but not a defining character of living organisms. Understood? So that is about reproduction. Next we see metabolism. What is metabolism? Sum total of all chemical reactions occurring in a cell or occurring in a body or in a cell is called metabolism. Sum total of all chemical reactions occurring inside a cell or in a cell is called metabolism. So, there are two types of metabolism. One is catabolism and other one is anabolism. What is catabolism? Catabolism andre breaking from larger molecules into simpler ones. It's nothing but catabolism. Anabolism andre by using simpler molecules it forms a larger molecule. That is called anabolism. So metabolism is nothing but sum total of all chemical reactions that occurs inside a cell or inside a body. There are two types of metabolism. One is catabolism, another one is anabolism. Catabolism andre break madadu. Larger molecules are broken into smaller pieces by a process called catabolism. Anabolism means by using smaller molecules it forms a larger molecule. That process is called anabolism. This metabolism is seen only in living organisms. It is seen only in living organisms, not in any non-living things. Even though chemical reactions occurs in test tube, coffee ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, lemon juice ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, outside the living body also we see the reactions, chemical reactions. ಹೌದು ತಾನೆ? Chemical reactions are seen not only inside the living organism but also outside the living, in vitro. In vitro andre outside the living cell. In test tube also we see the chemical reactions, but the reactions which occur in test tube cannot be considered as living things. That cannot be considered as living things, but it can be considered as living reaction anta consider ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. But it cannot be considered as living things. It is a living reaction anta consider ಮಾಡಿ. We are considering metabolism as a defining character of living organisms. It is seen in all living organisms without any exception. Understood? That is about metabolism. Next, we'll go with cellular levels of organization. Cellular levels of organization. Here we know that cells, which are structural and functional unit of organism, fundamental unit of living organisms are nothing but cells. So cells group together to form tissues, and tissues group together to form organs. Organs group together to form different organs. By doing specific function, we'll do the organ system, and organ system will give rise to organisms. So these levels of organization is seen only in living organisms. This is not seen in non-living things. Hagagi, cellular level or levels of organization is also considered as defining character of living things or living beings. Understood? Group of cells form a tissues. Tissues form a common tissues form a organs. Organs with specific functions will form different organs with specific functions form a organ systems, and different organ systems with a specific different organs by doing their specific functions form a organisms. This is seen only in living beings, not in non-living things. That's why cellular levels of organization is also considered as defining character of living beings. Understood? Then response to stimuli. Response to stimuli means consciousness. So, all living organisms are responding to stimuli, either it is physical, chemical, or biological. All living organisms will respond to stimuli, whether it is physical, chemical, or biological. Physical and the response to sunlight. So photoperiodism we see in plants. ಕೆಲವು ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಸ್ ಬೆಳಿಗ್ಗೆ ಸೂರ್ಯನ ಕಿರಣ ಬೀಳ್ತಿದ್ದಂಕಲೆ ಹೂ ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಕೆಲವು ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಸ್ 10 ಗಂಟೆಗೆ ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಕೆಲವು ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ಸ್ 4 o'clock ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ 4 ಗಂಟೆಗೆ ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. That is nothing. And sunflower, it is responding to light. So all come under physical response. Chemical will respond to chemicals also. Will enjoy the food. Is nothing but what? Chemical response. Biological, we interact with other living organisms also. So this response to stimuli is seen only in living organisms. But how the organisms responds to their environment differs from one individual with another. It's very difficult task to tell us this is the way the organism is going to respond to this physical or chemical or biological. It is not same in every individual. ಎಲ್ಲರಲ್ಲೂ ಸೇಮ್ ಇರಲ್ಲ, ಒಬ್ರೊಬ್ರು ಒಂದೊಂದು ರೀತಿ ರೆಸ್ಪಾಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಬಟ್ ಎವ್ರಿ ಲಿವಿಂಗ್ ಆರ್ಗಾನಿಸಮ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ರೆಸ್ಪಾಂಡ್. ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ರೆಸ್ಪಾಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಬಟ್ ದ ರೆಸ್ಪಾಂಡ್ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ that is not same in every individual, every living individual, but every living organisms are going to respond to stimuli, whether it may be physical, chemical, or biological. That's why response to stimuli or consciousness is also considered as defining character of living organisms. And one more point they have given in your textbook, that is self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is seen in only in human beings, not in any other living beings. Aware about their surrounding, aware about their how to behave with their surrounding people, or aware about their surrounding environment. Everything is recognized by human beings, nothing but self-consciousness. This self-consciousness is not seen in all living organisms, but consciousness is seen in all living organisms. That's why consciousness is considered as defining characters of living organisms. Understood? So, after knowing different characters of living organisms, we considered which three under defining character of living organisms. Metabolism is defining character. Levels of organization is defining character. And consciousness or response to stimuli. So these are considered, all these three considered as defining characters. Characters seen only in living organisms without any exception. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ಲ ಈಗ? So we see many characters in living organisms like growth, reproduction, metabolism, response to stimuli. But among them, three are considered as defining character, that is metabolism, levels of organization, consciousness of response to stimuli. Understood? So this is about the defining characters which we see only in living organisms. So we'll discuss in detail about this in your regular classes. So in this class you have to remember that growth is seen in both living and non-living. Hagagi, growth is not considered as defining character because in non-living, growth occurs outside the body of an organism. It's not organism outside the body of non-living things. It's an external growth, whereas in animals we see internal growth. But increase in size, increase in mass anta bandaga, it is seen in both living and non-living. Hagagi, growth is not a defining character. Reproduction study madidvi. Reproduction is, even though it is seen only in living organism, exception anta bantu alli yav yavadu mute, then sterile worker honeybees, ಮತ್ತೆ infertile human couples, even though they are living, they are unable to reproduce. Hagagi, reproduction is not considered as defining character, whether these three is seen in all living organisms without any exception. Hagagi, these three come under defining characters in living organisms. Understood? So thank you everyone.